looking to have a place, get a place or hotel, etc. We're grateful and thankful for everybody being on. So everybody who's watching on Facebook, who's on the podcast, who's on IG, everybody who's listening or who's watching this later on YouTube. We're grateful and thankful for everybody who's joining us, and we're going to get ready to get started in a little bit. Once again, we're getting ready to go into Willie Lynch syndrome, and we're at part 10 today. So if you need to catch up and see what we've been doing, see what we've been talking about, you can feel free to do so. Join in with us. We're actually on page, I think we made it to page 4, I believe. So if you'd like to be able to join us, you can. Or actually, I'm sorry, the end of page 3, rather, going into page 4. And we're going to talk about language. And we should be finishing up the letter itself today. So for those of you who are following, we'll finish up the letter. We'll probably have a couple things as far as some songs, some lyrics, some different things that we can look at as far as to talk more about this system that we can go a little deeper into to finish up. But as far as the actual letter itself, depending on what the Holy Spirit does and how she moves, we should be able to get things on track. And I see you, Minister Tamara. Shalom to everybody on all the platforms. Let's see. Shalom, Sister Sharice, Sister Shantae, Sister Barbara, Sister Beverly, BDS, Sister Deborah, family on here, Brother Jermaine, Brother Cole. Everybody, we thank you for being on and taking time out with us. And we're going to continue once again to go down and talk about the Willie Lynch letter. We'll be finishing up with the letter itself today, it looks like. Thanks, babe. And once again, thank you to my wife. We already said so, but I can't get enough of saying I'm so thankful and grateful for my wife, for her being on, for her being part of this conversation, for her being a blessing, for her being part of the conversation, for her giving her wisdom. By the way, if you're on Facebook, if you're on Instagram, if you're on the podcast, you can feel free to actually put your stuff in the chat. If you're on YouTube watching this later on, of course, you can put something in the comment section. And but if you're on IG, if you're on the podcast, if you're on Facebook, you can also call in or try to make sure that if you'd like to say something briefly, you can feel free to do that as well. And we're excited, and as soon as we see you asking to come on, we will make sure that we give you as much time as we can on the platform to be able to express yourself and join in on the conversation. So thank you to everybody who's on once again. And in this Willie Lynch series, we talked about so many things, but we've learned a lot about how we can get out of this, right? Willie Lynch didn't just say we have a system and nobody will ever be able to get out of it. His goal is that people never be able to come out of this, but he said he's shown us that whether we want to call his people who helped him with this experts or whatever he called them, the gentlemen, whatever, etc., he made it a point to say, hey, that these things can in fact change if we do certain things, if we go back to making sure that we are in fact on track. We can, if we go back to our natural state, if we go back to our culture, he made it a point to say that things will in fact change. So we're excited to be able to speak on the things that can in fact change. We're excited to be able to discuss those things and those items, and to have some great conversation today regarding the changes that will take place. We're not just here to talk about the problem only, we're here to talk about the change that must take place. And so today we're going to focus on language. Today we're going to focus on language. That's where our focus is today, is focusing on language and ensuring that we comprehend what's going on as far as the language of things, the things that are spoken, the things that are going on, the things that are we are speaking, and the culture we are speaking from, right? Because if we're going to get things correct, we have to comprehend what's the culture. See, language is going to be something important, because language is going to be the thing that actually gets us the culture. What you speak comes from somebody's culture. If you speak French, you have to learn the French culture to be able to comprehend that which you speak. If you speak Kiswahili, you have to understand the Kiswahili culture, even the African culture, since Kiswahili is considered to be a major business language. And matter of fact, some people say it's the number 1, others might say it's the number 2, but they would say nevertheless it's one of the top languages as far as business is concerned, or just language in general is concerned. in Africa, right? If you're going to learn how to do stuff with China or whatever, if you're going to speak Mandarin is different than other forms of Chinese, which means you have a different culture within a culture. The list goes on and on. Shalom, Chef, how you doing? So today we're going to talk about language. He said if we control and when we're on the Willie Lynch series, if you're reading with us on the PDF, we're down towards the bottom of page 3, where it says in bold print, control the language. Shalom, Dennis, how you doing? Shalom, Cynthia. Shalom, everybody. Once again on Facebook, IG, YouTube, the podcast. We appreciate you and thank you guys. Hopefully soon we'll be back on TikTok. It looks like we'll be there sooner than later. So thank you for your diligence in helping us with that. And thank you for waiting for further instructions on how we will need your help possibly in the future to make sure that we get Kofi_42 back up and running. But we're grateful that while we get it back up and running, we'll have a backup this time that's already viable, that we can make sure we're putting stuff out and making sure people can listen in on that platform. So, Shalom, Alice, thanks for joining us. And so we're going to talk about controlling the language, right? And once again, we're not just dealing with only the physical stuff, right? Racism, capitalism, etc. Those are manifestations of things spiritually going on, right? Just like we're dealing with a symptom. We're talking about racism because we're dealing with the symptom, but in order to get the symptom taken care of, we have to deal with what's wrong. Like in your body, if you have a rash, they treat the rash. We've been taught to treat the rash, but the reality is the rash is a symptom that something else is going on, right? Something more sinister with the body is going on. Something on a cellular structure is going on, right? And so since something on a cellular structure is going on, we need to heal the cells, right? There might be different issues you have going on with your mitochondria. The mitochondria begins to mess up. That can cause cancerous issues, right? So we might need to eat something or focus on the mitochondria in order to heal what's going on. Shalom, Dashima, how you doing? So today we're going to focus on we're focusing on the symptom, but we're not focusing on it. We're looking at the symptoms to get back to what is causing this manifestation, what's causing the spiritual outcry, what's calling this thing that we call racism, this thing that we call oppression, this thing that we're calling whatever name you have for it, Stockholm syndrome, etc. What is causing these items, and what is it that we have the ability to do? What is it that we already have a calling, an ability, a mindset to be able to take care of? Shalom, Beverly. What is it the Most High has shown us to be able to get Deuteronomy 28, 1 through 14, rather than focusing in on 15 through 68, right? What are these things that we have? So we're talking about control the language, right? And remember, in all this stuff, he said we're going to take differences, small differences, right? And we make them bigger. Right? That's taking something that wasn't necessarily a big deal in your culture where you came from, and now we're going to make it a big deal to the point to where you'll fight amongst yourselves. Remember that he said that our goal is to make sure that others, both black and white, everybody, will continue to use a perverted system, and we won't have to take care of it because they comprehend. He studied your Bible, right? We don't study our Bible, but he studied it, and he said, and Shalom, Sister Katie, he said, if we get this to a place, to a point in our lives where we comprehend and recognize and realize that leadership is over the environment, not over people. Shalom, Bradley, how you doing? Right? So if we understand that leadership is not over people, it's over an environment, we have to create an environment, right? Like we're not supposed to be, as a pastor, as a helif, as a marach, as somebody over the tarach, etc., as a malek. I am not, or a malak. I am not somebody who is trying his hardest to be over people. I'm trying to set an environment. I realize and recognize that once the environment has been set, then people will want to come into the environment and they will want to use their gifts, their callings, etc., to be able to help the environment continue to move forward and us to continue to have what we need and what's necessary. Well, the same thing with this Willie Lynch syndrome. The environment has been set and people have been put in the environment. Think about what the Most High did with the Garden of Eden. He made the garden, then placed Adam in the Garden of Eden. He set up the environment, then placed Adam in that which was already created, so that the environment was already there and basically Adam would simply just be in tune with the kingdom to be able to take over the environment. Well, the same thing, right? You create the environment of something that is against your nature. You call it civilization, even though you already had people in their civilization in their natural state. You take them out of their civilization, you reverse their nature, you have it to where men are behind and scared, you have it to where women are out in front and independent and frozen in fear, you have it to where babies are going to be learning from mothers who are without fathers, who are depending on, or really not depending on anybody, but have to depend on themselves, who will teach them the same system. Girls, you got to be independent. guys, you got to stay out the way. Just be there ready to breed. Then we'll send you out into your wild or savage state, so to speak. And every time we need you for something, we'll bring you back in, not for marriage, right? Because sex is really marriage, but not for marriage, but for what? For breeding. This is what is being taught, what's being brought to people, what's being shown to people. This is what is being given still to this day. So we talked about so many different things. We talked about some of the terms, orbiting and all these different things, and the crossbreeding and these things. So now we're going to talk about controlling the language. All right. So let's read what he says. So crossbreeding completed. And we got to make sure that we're on track. We remember what crossbreeding is in order to get this right. So crossbreeding completed. So what did he say crossbreeding meant? He said crossbreeding a horse means taking a horse and breeding it with an ass, and you get a dumb, backward ass, long-headed mule that is not reproductive or productive by itself. Crossbreeding N-words means taking so many drops of good white blood and putting them into as many N-word women as possible, varying the drops by the various tone that you want, and letting them breed with each other until another cycle of color appears as you desire. What this means is this: put the N-words and the horse in a breeding pot, mix N-words, mix some assess and some good white blood, and what do you get? You get a multiplicity of colors of ass backward, unusual N-words running, tied to a backward ass, long-headed mule, the one productive of itself, the other sterile, the one constant, the other dying. We keep the N-word constant, for we may replace the mules for another tool. Both mule and N-word tied to each other, neither knowing where the other came from, and neither productive for itself, nor without each other. Now that's key when we go into controlling language. Thank you for being on, Brother Dennis. Appreciate you. Right? So that's key when we talk about the language, because the language is culture. Shalom, Sister Sonia. Shalom, Sister Cassandra. So that's going to be key. Shalom, Sister Alsha. How you doing? So that's key when it comes to what? To language. That becomes key when it comes to what? To language, and to language is what? From culture. So now that we finished that, and we talked about that yesterday, he says, now crossbreeding completed. So now that we've completed this task of crossbreeding, of getting people to believe, right? Like, even think about it. How hard is it to fight against what we call at least white supremacy? And yet, how is it? It's very hard to fight white supremacy if you have ties to being white, even down to your DNA, right? And he said that the N-word, due to this crossbreeding, N-word males specifically, some of them being males that will continue to create, some of them being males that won't create, right? Some males will be locked up, some males will die, so they'll be killed, some males will work themselves to death, some males will be sterile because of how they eat, etc. Now that we've remember we talked about that, you eradicate the male, get him out the way. We talked about that in a very, how do we want to say, in a very, I won't even say out there. What is it? We talked about it in a very real way, where you could kind of see what was going on, right, with the male being tarred and feathered, burned, all those things, and the woman had to watch men be beat as well, and then had to make a decision in their mind to become independent. So we got the male out of the way, and the male, he says, is crossbred, and so they don't know where they come from. They don't know how they got here. They don't know where they came from, right? And remember that the anomaly he's talking about that will change things is when we get back to a knowledge of self. We know where we came from. We know what our culture is. We know how we speak. We begin to have our own standard, and we don't say that the world is our standard. We don't say that somebody else is our standard. We don't say that a Republican or a Democrat is our standard. When we come to knowledge of self, knowledge of the Most High, who we belong to, what is righteous, righteous meaning right legal standing, now we're an anomaly that people will begin to look up to, and it says we even become an inspiration. We become a miracle to people, but really we live in the miraculous. And as living in the miraculous, now people want to sit at your feet. Now people want to say, or look at your lifestyle. Now people want to look at your marriage and say, oh, you know what, if their marriage is like that, my marriage can be like that. So now marriage is something we look at. Somebody says, oh, he can be masculine and it's not toxic. So now they want to be masculine. They say, oh, she can be feminine, and that doesn't mean she has to be a strong black woman, even though she has strength, but she doesn't have to be independent, and therefore frozen, worried about always keeping her independence in every move she makes and teaching her children to be that. Let me be a part of that, right? So we have a way out of this, right? But if we're not careful, he says, crossbreeding completed. So now that, so we're seeing what they did to get us here. Now that this has been completed, for further severance from their original beginnings for further what? Severance. So now that crossbreeding is completed, they've been severed. We have been severed from where we come from. He says now we have to further severance them from their original beginning. You being the original man. You having an original culture. You having an original understanding and comprehension of the word of Yah. You having an original comprehension of what a university is since you created the first universities. You have an original comprehension of Paleo-Hebrew. You having an original comprehension of what is righteous and what is not. You having an original comprehension of sovereignty being kings and queens. That's why they keep telling you stop calling yourself kings and queens. Why would you tell a king or queen stop calling yourself a king or a queen and have them in a republic, which means that they're in a kingdom, right? They're severancing you. So for further severance of your original beginning, we must completely annihilate the mother tongue of both the new N-word and the new mule. Remember, now he said you're going to have N-word males and you're going to have N-word mules. See, once again, attacking the male. The N-word male, that is what he said in the paragraph before. You had a constant N-word male. He was going to continue to be around, and you were going to have an N-word mule. He wasn't going to live but so long, and he wasn't going to have any generations that were going to continue. So he says we have to further sever them from that, and he said we must completely annihilate, not we must keep around. He said we have to completely annihilate the mother tongue of both this new N-word, so the next generation of person that's going to keep on breeding, and the new mule, the person that's not even going to keep on breeding, because he might get to the N-word. Remember, they're tied together. Their ability to move as a people is still tied together, right? Matter of fact, if we want to, I don't want to keep putting this up because it's very tough to deal with, but let's just keep on dealing with truth. Why would they say, even as far as slavery, why would they say that some of these N-word males are mules? Not just because they won't continue to live, but what's another reason why they would call them a mule? Salah. Think about it. Why would they say that these people are mules? Why would they say these brothers are mules, especially in that time? Because they're going to be dealing with them like they dealt with Booker T. Washington. No, not Booker T. Washington, excuse me, with George Washington Carver. George Washington Carver was castrated because a white family took him in. They said the only way we can have him come into our home is if we castrate him because we don't want him to impregnate our white daughter. That's a fear that they have, that whatever we put is dominant, and therefore we would put something in the daughter, we would contaminate even the daughter, right? Because they're supposed to put white blood in us. We're not supposed to put black blood in them, right? So even then, we're castrating them. We're taking away the seed. We're taking away who they are. And on top of that, we're going to make sure that we take away their mother tongue. So we take away their ability to reproduce, and we're going to take away their ability to what? To speak their own language. So the only thing they're going to speak is what we say speak. If they say Aquaaba, they're not going to know Etesen. If we say Habari, they're not going to know that they can say Habari or Jambo back. They'll know Je m'appelle. They'll know mi nombre es. They'll know my name is, right? But they won't know, right? They won't know Mimini Nina Faraku Kutana Nueve, right? They'll know Hola, como está? But they won't know their own language. They won't know Boker Tov later on in the day. They won't know Shalom. Matter of fact, some of us know this. I've talked to some of you to where if you say Shalom, people will say that it's offensive that you say Shalom, but Shalom is your culture. Why are people offended when you simply speak who you are? Why are people offended when you simply do what you're supposed to do? Why are people offended when you are in your nature? It is because you are using your mother tongue. Your mother tongue or your mother tongue being taken away is essential to keeping up the Willie Lynch syndrome. If you speak a language outside of what they told you to do, they're in trouble, because when you speak your language, you speak a culture. Not just the language that you speak with your mouth. Remember, 93% of communication is nonverbal. That means, right? So that means that black men speak to black men with body language that nobody else uses. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? White man walking down the street, he sees a black guy, he might, look at him, he might wave, he might smile, he might do a quick head nod or whatever. Brother looks at another brother, what do? You put your head up. We got a language, right? If I see another brother and I say, hey man, be safe, King, he knows that I'm saying this system is against you. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself. We have a language that we know, right? And the more we speak this language, shalom, Brother Thomas, the more we speak this language, right, the more we act in our culture, the more we mess up the system. This is one of the reasons why whenever you begin to speak your language and you have things that you use, you always talk about, why can't black people keep anything for ourselves? You know why? Because the second it becomes yours and nobody else can say that we own it, it's the second that it becomes detrimental to Willie Lynch syndrome. The second that you begin to speak your language, the second that a black woman says, hey queen, I love you, I love the way that you look. The way that when you begin to establish another queen as being beautiful and powerful and majestic and talking about her divine spirit, and you begin to speak to her and say, man, you know what, the interdependency you have with your spouse, rather than talking about being independent, when you start to say, man, the fact that you are interdependent, man, that's a lovely thing. That's a beautiful thing. I'm so amazed by that. I love the way that you can do that. I look up to that. You start speaking a language that they say, well, they're not supposed to speak that, right? So he says you have to make sure that you institute a new language that involves the new life's work of both. That's who? The male, the N-word male, who's going to constantly keep moving forward, and the N-word what? Female, right? Why are we focusing back on the male now, right? We're focusing back on the male because the male is going to speak. Who speaks? Who usually out there is going to be the one who's known for speaking more? I'm not saying a woman or a wife won't speak her mind, speak her piece, but who out there, you have a mindset of he on the street corner, he wilding out, he talking, we're always like, and in this society, because we've been taught he might get hurt, he might get messed up, we're like, yo, bro, keep it down. Don't speak like that. Don't talk like that. Don't talk to the police like that. Don't do the why? Because he has a mindset as a leader of his environment. He's supposed to speak, and he's supposed to speak how he speaks. And when somebody comes against his environment, comes against his culture, he's supposed to speak against it. But we've been taught, right? Because frozen in fear. Hey, don't speak that. Don't speak your language. Don't speak your mannerisms. It's always amazing to me that we as black people, we as Hebrews, we as Israel, we as the diaspora, we as Africans, we as natives, we find that when a black man is dressed like a white man, we say that man looks good. But when he dresses in his own culture, we don't have anything of value in it. We say, man, you might need to change the way that you look. You might need to change the way you dress. Why are you dressed like that? Why is your hair like that? Why do you grow your hair out? Why do you speak like that? Why don't you look like a corporate person, right? You need to dress in your suit and your tie, right? When I remember when I used to dress in a suit and tie, people used to say, man, you look like a pastor. Why does a pastor look like a white man? Why do I have to dress like a white man in order to be a pastor? You said what's the meaning of shalom, Brother Dennis? Shalom is just basically it's a greeting, and it's also just saying peace be upon you, right? Like peace, we wish you peace. Even if we were to spell it out character by character, the shah is actually meaning destruction or chewing of. The aleph will come after, it means the fathers, the source is there. The la, it comes from lamed, that means the shepherd, and the mim, that's the water, the blood, and the spirit, right? So you're actually saying that the Most High, the source, being one, is our teacher, and being teacher, he chews up anything that causes us not to have peace through the water, the blood, and the spirit. So when we say shalom, some people say shalom, but when we say shalom to you, that's what we mean, and that's Israel, that's Hebrew, right? That's Paleo Hebrew, and the way that I was putting the characters out, right? So this is, but and even in that, right? That's our culture. When you say shalom to somebody, you're speaking your culture. You're saying, hey, when I say shalom to you, I'm saying the Father, the source of all, is the one is one with the Son, because he's the shepherd, and the Holy Spirit, right, as well. But is teaching us and wants to be over your life to lead and guide you through the covering of the blood, the spirit that's inside of you, the water, even the physical water, the physical manifestation of your cells, your organs, etc., right? And he's going to make sure that he chews up anything that takes away your ability to have peace. That's what we're saying when we say shalom, right? Amen. Thank you, Sister Sonia. That's our culture. Now, so why would you not speak that to somebody else, right? And why would you let somebody else have your language and tell you that you're not allowed to use that when they speak it to each other, even though they're not going to be peaceful with you? How dare they get to say shalom to each other while not being peaceful? But you can't say shalom to one another. It's language, control of the language. So this is what he says, right? So we're going to change the language of everybody, right? He says, the language is a peculiar institution. Look at the word usage. He said, language is a Peculiar institution. Language is an institution. Marriage is an institution. He's saying language is an institution because it institutes something. It leads to culture, right? Now watch this. This is what he's going to say. Language is a peculiar institution. It leads to the heart of a people. The what of a people? Wow, think about that. Language leads to the heart of a people. The way that I speak, it speaks to the heart. The way that I move, it speaks to the heart. The prayers that I pray, they speak to the heart of the Most High, and they speak to the heart of His people, right? Language is a peculiar institution, he said. It's peculiar. It's an institution that's unlike any other. It's peculiar. It doesn't fit into any other type of institution. It's different than other institutions. Now he's talking about from his perspective, from his culture's perspective, what they study. But they said that we found the way that we looked at when it comes to language is a peculiar institution. It leads to the heart of a people. Right? So the more a foreigner knows about the language of another country, the more he is able to move through all levels of the society. Wow. The more I know about the language of another country, if I can speak, if I go to France, and even if I can't speak that much, but if there's people that can speak more French than me. However, they have terrible, they sound terrible doing it, right? They have a terrible accent. And so there's some people that even if they can speak more French than me, right? When you go to France, if you can't speak with the right accent, or at least they see that you're giving a lot of effort and there's some stuff that flows or whatever, and you have some, because they don't even call it French, they call it the French, la français. They don't just call it French, they say it's the French, right? So if you go to France and you try to speak, but you don't even meet certain things culturally when you're speaking, and even if you know what they're saying, they won't speak to you in French. They'll rather speak to you in English. They'll just sit to you and speak to you in English because they'd rather not waste their time. You're wasting their time to try and speak their language, and you're not going to respect the language enough to speak it the way that they want you to. Matter of fact, there are certain places in France, right? I believe it's South France. My wife is on. She knows more about this than I do, so she can correct me. But there are certain places in France, usually down south, I believe, or sometimes in the outskirts of certain places where they consider them to be like country bumpkins. And so when they speak French and they don't speak it right, they don't like those people just because they don't speak French correctly. They don't speak la français. They don't speak the French. Shalom, Sharice, how you doing? Sharice Russell, how you doing? So they want you to speak the French, not French, but the French, not a version of French. In Montreal, I actually learned French in Montreal a little bit first, and then everywhere else I tried to use it, people were like, "What are you talking about?" And it's because in Montreal, they have a bastardized version of French. They've been away from them a long time, and they developed their own version. It's mixed with other things. It has a weird accent. They don't say things the same. And so if a French person from France hears somebody from Montreal speaking French, they would say, oh, they don't even speak French. Right? Because you're not going to get far in their culture if you can't even, do well with their language. Minister Tamer said, explains why they stole our language and made it inaccessible to us. Right. So watch this. Think about what we just said, Minister Tamer. I'm gonna use what you just said and think about what you just said. He said, the more a foreigner knows about the language of another country, the more he's able to move through all levels of that society. So even if we believe ourselves to be foreign to Africa, right? He's saying that if we ever learned about our African heritage and our language, we would be able to move through all levels of African society. If we learn Kiswahili, if we learn Lingala, if we learn Avra, if we learn Ivrit, if we learn Igbo, if we learn Kemet, if we learn Ethiopia, right? If we learn, because see, think about the culture. This is why you have to be careful. So I agree with people when, especially a Moor will tell you something and they're speaking well. Now they're not speaking 100% correct, but I get what they mean when they say this, right? If you speak to somebody who considers himself a Moor, they don't want to be called black, they don't want to be called this, that, whatever, they don't want to be called African, they don't want to be called Moor because they're talking about their righteous legal standing within the law of UCC and the Constitution and the republics of the world and stuff, and how all these things go together. So I get it, but they'll tell you, they'll say something to you that's really honest. Like, even though there are tribes that call themselves black, right? Kemet means black, Kush means black, et cetera, right? Ethiopia means black, or people who are burnt of the sun, right? So there are people who call themselves black. There were tribal people who call themselves slippery blacks, etc., right? Ham's name, Ham, actually is, it means black. It means hot. It means black as well, right? So there are people who call themselves black, but they'll say to you something that's interesting, which is they'll say, what language is black? Shalom, Christina. How you doing? Right? They'll ask you a question. They'll say, "What language is black?" And I get what they mean. They're trying to get you to comprehend that you're talking about black, but you don't speak black. Is there a language that's black? Now, there is once again, I just labeled quite a few tribes that call themselves black. So there is a language called black, right? But we just use something. Matter of fact, when they try to say the Negro is a fiction and all this stuff or whatever, well, he's a fiction in this fictitious corporation, right? So you have to know how to deal with that fictitious corporation. But Negro, the word Negro comes before negro in Spanish. It was the people from Africa and even the Moors who taught them what Negro means. It was the Carthaginians who taught them what Negro means because there were a tribe of people in West Africa called Negro, called Negro. Right? So yeah, so they'll say, what language is black? Where is black? There are languages that are called black because there are people called black. But nevertheless, since a lot of people don't want to deal with that, if I say I speak Kemetic, I'm saying I speak Kemet. Not Kemet, Kemi means black, right? If I say I speak Ethiopia, that means I speak the land of the burnt sun. I speak those people. People don't get that, right? If you say you speak Spanish, you're not saying you speak you're not saying that you see, watch this. If a person from Mexico who considers themselves to be white goes to Spain and says I'm Spanish, right? The Spanish person will say you're not Spanish. You speak Spanish. You speak our culture, right? But you're not Spanish. If you were Spanish, you would be a Spaniard, right? If you're somebody who says, I speak English, but you go to England, they would say you're not English, you speak English, right? They would say that you are an American. They wouldn't say, if you came from Canada over to England, they wouldn't say, oh, you're English, even though technically the people from Canada and from America are English, right? But they wouldn't say, oh, you speak English. And shalom, Urka and CWH, how you doing? Right? They wouldn't say, oh, you speak, or you are English. They would say, what? No, you speak English, you're Canadian. If you spoke Mandarin and you went over to China, they wouldn't say, oh, you're Chinese now because you speak Chinese. Even if you speak it well, they'll respect you because you can go through all levels. You can break through. They'll respect the fact that you can speak Mandarin well. However, they will say, well, even though you speak Mandarin well, don't get it twisted. You're not Chinese. You speak a Chinese language, right? And so even though you're not something, even though you're a foreigner, the foreigner can get far in somebody else's culture when they begin to speak somebody else's culture. When I speak your language, I speak you. Right? So if I speak rose en français, if I say rose in French, I not only speak a plant, I speak a color. In America, we don't think of, you might think of a rose as red or pink or this and that, but if I say rose, right, or rose in French, en français, right, what I'm saying is I'm speaking, I could be speaking about a plant, but I can also be speaking about a specific color, the color pink, right? That's a cultural difference, right? Matter of fact, the colors that we have, a lot of the words we have for colors come from other cultures. These colors didn't exist. A lot of cultures had very plain colors because dyeing and things like that were usually you had to be somebody that was rich to be able to dye something a certain color. So when you had people wearing different colors, they would call it whatever it was. That's why naranjo in Espanol is a fruit and it's also a color. It is an orange that you eat. It is also orange that you color, right? So because it comes from a culture, right? It comes from a culture. It looks like something in our culture. This is what we, as a people, we've agreed that this color looks like this fruit. So that's what we call it. Amen. Revelation 2:9. Let me make sure, because I'm not seeing I missed the piece of that. Hold on one second. Let's go to, y'all forgive my typing. My hands are cold. Let's see. Revelation 2:9, and bring this up real quick. So Revelation 2:9, I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them that say that they are Israel or Hebrew and are not. They are actually the synagogue of Satan, right? So I know these things, right? It's your culture, right? Even when somebody says something is satanic, that's a cultural thing. People don't want to talk about that, but that's cultural. If you say it's satanic, you're saying it's cultural. In our culture, that's satanic. Satan comes from a culture. That word usage, it comes from a culture. They're speaking our language. They're not Israel, right? So who has the right right? Think about this. They told you you're not Israel. They told you you're not American. Remember, the original definition of an American is a black or copper-colored person who's indigenous to Turtle Island, to what we now call the Americas. They flipped it and told you, even though you're the original American, they told you you're not American. And so in order to speak American, people will say this. You'll hear people, ignorant people, of course, but you'll hear people say all the time, man, you know what? I'm tired of all these foreigners, and they come here and they don't speak our language, and they're speaking Spanish, and they're speaking, Chinese, and they're speaking in these weird accents and stuff. I don't like these people. You know what I need? You know what? They need to speak American. Well, if you need to speak American, you need to speak Cherokee, baby. Right? You need to speak Gullah Geechee. You need to speak Choctaw. You need to speak Haudenosaunee. You need to speak Sioux. You need to speak Iroquois. You need to speak Wampanoag. You need to speak Cali, the Khalifa people, the Californian people, who are black people who worship a black goddess who was once a woman, and they made her into a black goddess. You got to speak our language in order to be an American, but they flipped it on you, right? If we change the language. Remember, he said, language is a peculiar institution. It leads to the heart of a people. The more a foreigner knows about the language of another country, the more he is able to move through all levels. How many levels of society? All levels of society. Cole said they're not ready for that. Yeah, and that's why they're not ready for that. That's why they keep you from your language. A person that can speak your language, and watch this, not only your language, which we're going to get into, not only your language, what if you can speak his language? And you can be better at his language than he is. If you learn the law and the language of his law better than he knows it, you become a problem. What if you speak the language of marriage? Your marriage allows people to change. You become a problem. What if you speak the language of wealth? You speak different. You become a problem. What if you speak the language, death and life is in the power of the tongue, and those that love it eat the fruit there? What if you speak the language of positivity? So that when you find your wife, you find a great thing, and you find something that helps you to obtain favor from a dawn, you become a problem. Thanks for liking the likes and the shares. We appreciate it on all the platforms. Right? What if you learn these things? What if you develop these things? You become problematic because you're going to be able to do what? Move through all levels of society. I don't have to be. I'm still a foreigner. I'm still a citizen of the United States of America, but I can move through the United States with ease. And still have authorization because I'm a foreigner of another land. I'm an ambassador. I'm not of this system. I'm in it. I can move in it, but guess what? I'm not of it. My authorization comes from somewhere else. I'm a master of the public servant. The public servant is not a master of me. I'm a master of the public servant. Let a public servant speak to me about trying to take something from me or take something from my family or have us out of position or whatever. You can't do that to us. Well, what do you mean you can't do that to us? Well, first of all, we're sovereign. You're trying to deal with somebody. We're sovereign. How are you going to deal with my sovereignty? How are you going to take away from my sovereignty? I reign over this. Shalom, his promise. How you doing? Thanks for being on. Right? You speak differently when you recognize language. If you're in a republic of the United States of America, you're in the kingdom of the United States of America. If you're in a democracy, you're in a place where a few people who live together give you a little bit and govern over you. So if you're in a democratic republic, you're in a kingdom where a few people who live together give you a little bit and rule over you. And if you realize that that's a legal fiction to be in the United States rather than to be a king in the United States of America, you walk different in the United States of America. And by the way, this same UCC and stuff we're talking about, that's in England. The same thing we're talking about, that's in Russia. The same thing that we're talking about, that's in China. The same thing that we're talking about, that's in Australia. The same thing we're talking about, that's in Japan. It moves all over the place. You said, what language should we adopt to better communicate? I believe any language that's of our natural self, right? We focus on Paleo Hebrew. I would say, Kiswahili, because it's going to be a language that you can use all over Africa. Therefore, you can speak to different people in the diaspora. Learn different languages. That used to be our culture as well. Go back to Africa. Go to other places in general, right? However, go back to Africa when you get a chance, or if you've ever been, you know this. When you go to Africa, it's not a weird thing for somebody to speak multiple languages. And I'm not just talking about two. Somebody speaks 7, 13, 15 languages. That's what you do, because that's the culture that you're in, right? We're trying to get one language down and be more sophisticated and try to make everything that we do. Think about the language that we do, the clothes that we wear, all this stuff. We wear somebody else's stuff. We speak somebody else's language. We have somebody else's affirmations. We wait for somebody else to affirm what we've said. And then or even to confirm what we said, and then we say, see, now that's a black thing. They trying to take our stuff, right? See, look at the way we wear Calvin Klein and we wear a NBA hat and we put it to the side. The NBA hat is owned by the NBA. The NBA selling it to you. Is the NBA black owned or white owned? Is that your culture? Is NBA your culture? See, we make the mistake. Well, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar plays in the NBA, and LeBron James played in the NBA, and Will Chamberlain played in the NBA, and Allen Iverson, look what he did in the NBA. See, they got tattoos in the NBA. The NBA is black. The NBA is not a black league. It's owned by white people. They tell the black players what to do. They pay the black players, and if the black players don't want to do what they're supposed to do, they have contracts. They say, we're not going to pay you. The NBA is not a black league. The NBA is a white league. It's a white league that black players are allowed to function in because they're allowed to be $1 million slaves. But always don't get it twisted. The second that they decide they're not going to listen as $1 million slaves to what they're supposed to do, the second that they decide they're not going to do what they're supposed to do is the second they say, we're not paying you anymore. Right? Craig Hodges, if you want to look up that name, Craig, C-R-A-I-G, Hodges, H-O-D-G-E-S, back in the 90s. Right? People talk about Colin Kaepernick in the 90s. And the NBA is supposed to be this progressive league in the 90s, right? Craig Hodges said that he wasn't about the United States of America like that anymore and didn't like the flag. All of a sudden, he wasn't playing no more. Go back to look at a guy named Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. His original name was Chris Jackson, played on LSU with Shaquille O'Neal and was considered to be a better player than Shaquille O'Neal. He's considered to be Steph Curry decades before there was a Steph Curry, right? Decades ago. Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf was the guy. Chris Jackson was the guy. Everybody wanted to play with him. He's on the Denver Nuggets. Everybody, when you played a video game, you tried to play as Chris Jackson. You wanted to be Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. Man, he was a great player. Guess what? He stopped. He started saying, I don't deal with the flag. I don't want to come out. I'm not going to, listen to it or whatever. He didn't take a knee. He just wouldn't even come out. And they told him it was okay for him to not come out. That was their thing of, if you won't stand up for the flag, that was their version of saying, you're taking a knee. So they were just like, okay, just stay in the back. You don't even got to come out, right? So he didn't come out. He followed what they said. And when he didn't come out, guess what they did to him? When he stopped coming out, guess what they did to him? They said, after his contract was up, he got blackballed, never was able to work in there again. We think this is new stuff that they're doing with Kaepernick and others. This is stuff that goes back a ways. We think this is new stuff that they're doing with it. No, they've been doing this. Shalom, Sister Deborah, again. How you doing? So you got to recognize and comprehend what's going on. This is a continued thing. Right, they sell tickets. Even Kyrie Irving now, right? Kyrie Irving needs to learn how to, you said your great-grandmother spoke multiple languages, 9 languages. That's amazing. That's great. Kyrie Irving is a great example. Now, he doesn't necessarily know everything he needs to know, but if you think about Kyrie Irving, this is what he's been doing. He's been missing games. He's been trying to help people. He's been giving money to people. He learned about his native heritage, went over to him and started making sure he gave money. He stayed there on the land. He signed autographs for him like a whole day. Like it took a whole day out of his time just to make sure his people could see somebody successful. His mother was native but never really taught him about him. And so he went and found his roots. And now he's taking care of his people, right? And everything about him now, they tried it down. He said that he doesn't believe that the world is round. They said that he's terrible about that. Now, he doesn't know how to speak on this stuff. He studied playing the game. That's why people, I think he should work more with people who know what they're talking about to be able to speak for him and with him and to support him, right? But he's become an interesting thing in the NBA because he said, look, I'm not getting the vaccine. And so they're paying him this year to basically not play. So he's gone. We're looking at Colin Kaepernick and we're looking at the guy, I forget what his name, Eric something, who played for the Carolina Panthers for a little bit and I think started playing with the 49ers. Yeah, and he took the knee with Kaepernick and stuff like that. Remember they had Jay-Z come out and Jay-Z comes out and says, you know what? We don't need to take a knee anymore because now they're allowing people like myself to stand next to Roger Goodell. Like, what does that have to do with anything? It's a language, right? It's a cultural thing. They're speaking to you. They're telling you. Remember, you got to know the language. Remember, I've talked about this often. Barack Obama came out, and I'm be honest, he's like basically the second to last time I voted one more time after that, really just for the sake of voting. I didn't even really care about the stuff or whatever, but I kind of voted just to like put my little, proverbial middle finger up, if you will. I know that's a bad example, but I'm just saying to kind of say, I don't care about the system, and I kind of voted negatively, even though I voted on some stuff for real, but just that, but I haven't done it in years, right? I don't really care to. But I remember when Obama got voted in the first time, and I remember I was like, okay, I'm probably just gonna vote for him just because he's black, like a lot of people did. Like, if we just keep it 100, a lot of people don't want to be real about it, but a lot of us, we basically voted for Obama if you voted for him because he's black. That was as far as we needed to know. That was as far as we needed to go. Like, that dude's black, right? And then he hit us with something, and I said, uh-oh. I said, we're in trouble. They asked him, about, well, people are voting for you, and you're going to be the first black president, blah, blah, even though that's a lie. We know that Eisenhower was black. We know that Lincoln was black. We know that the first president, not George Washington, but there were 8 presidents before him, and the first president of them was black. So we know that was a lie, but they were basically saying, since you're going to be the first black president of America, how are you going to do things? And he said, well, I'm not the white president. I'm not the black president. I'm the president. And IG, just to let you guys know, something weird is going on. Hopefully we don't lose you, but if we do, just come on over to Facebook. You can look us up under the same name, all right? Just in case something goes on, just look up #FindKofi on Facebook if you need to switch over. Having weird things going on with you guys, so hopefully you guys stay on the entire time. But he was telling them, like, look, I'm not the black president, I'm not the white president, I'm the president. Everybody clapped, and I said, uh-oh, we're in trouble. Because when he said that, I realized what he was saying. He was saying, look, I don't work for black people, right? Like, don't get it twisted. I'm not here to worry about black. I'm worried about domestic, protecting the United States, supporting and defending the Constitution of the United States, a corporation, against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And if black people are enemies of the United States corporation, and if black people being who they're supposed to be is an enemy, then I will support and defend the United States corporation against them. That's what he said, but we don't know the language. So we clapped for him, thinking he was saying he was our guy. He wasn't saying he's with us. He wasn't saying he's for us. He was saying, look, as long as you don't mess around with this corporation, we got you. Right? Yeah, he was the LGBT president, right? Put all that stuff in for LGBTQ+. No black rights. And I'm not here to squash LGBTQ+ people. I'm here to tell you that he didn't give us one thing that was for blacks. And then it's interesting. Black people said, well, yeah, he did give us something. You say, well, what did he give us? Well, you know what our answer always is? It's one of two answers. It's usually, well, he gave us the right to have health care. Okay. Was that for black people? And if they don't, and if that doesn't get you, then he says, well, then they said, well, he tried to make sure that poor people could have more stuff. So you're saying that to deal with poor people is to deal with black people, because there's a lot of black people that aren't poor, and even there's some poor people that can't get whatever poor people are supposed to have the right to get, right? But we don't know the language. But then it said, if you don't have anything positive to say, don't say anything at all. Hey man, that's part of the language too, right? Brother Cole said, yeah, after I voted for Obama just because he was black, and or you said, yeah, and when I saw what he stood for, I completely stopped voting altogether, And a lot of people want to talk about that, but a lot of black people felt like that. I forget the name of the guy who before Sidney Poitier became Sidney Poitier was his understudy. He's pretty famous, but he ended up doing a lot more for civil rights than he did for his fame and acting and singing and stuff like that. He had a very famous song. I don't think he's not the one that did the Lime and the Coconut. I forget what he sung. If I can remember it, you guys would know who I'm talking about. But nevertheless, he came out. He was one of the people that made sure Obama was able to get the black vote. And then Obama started acting up, and he said basically a year, 2 years in, he said, I'm not supporting him again. And people said, why not? He said, because he's not doing anything for my people. And this is a person who marched with Martin, who helped Malcolm X, who was there with Sister Maya Angelou, right? This is a person who knows about the Black Panther Party. This is a person who lived and put down his life. He put his life on the line, right? And was one of the people who didn't die, one of our heroes that didn't get killed off. And thank you, Harry Belafonte. Thank you, Harry Belafonte. And he made it a point, and he said, like, look, I don't support him anymore. And Harry Belafonte, he's a guy that when he speaks, we as a people, we should listen. When Harry Belafonte speaks, we listen. Shalom, Canvas. How you doing? You know, if you don't know about Harry Belafonte, study Harry Belafonte. That's an elder you need to know about. So back to this. He says, so language is a peculiar institution. It leads the heart of a people. The more a foreigner knows about the language of another country, the more he is able to move through all levels of society. Therefore, remember I said whenever you see therefore, you need to think about wherefore. Therefore means something came before, right? So because of what we just talked about, therefore, if the foreigner is an enemy of the country, to the extent that he knows the body of the language, to that extent is the country vulnerable to the attack or invasion of foreign culture. Did you catch that? Did you catch that? Let's read that again. Therefore, so because of what we just talked about, if the foreigner is an enemy of the country, to the extent that he knows the body of the language, to that extent is the country vulnerable to attack or invasion of a foreign culture. Not attack or invasion because they're going to drop a bomb. The bomb he's talking about is culture. If you know somebody else's language and you bring your own language with you and you can speak both languages, you can be able to maneuver through the country that you're in, the system that you're in, and you can also bring the culture that you're of. You are a danger. Shalom, Khalil, how you doing? You become dangerous. Remember we talked about a little while ago, we had a session where we talked about, I think it was an evening session, we talked about great people are dangerous. You become what? A danger to society. You become what? A danger to society. When you know where you are, what you are of, and you can also operate in what somebody else is of, but you don't have to be of it at the same time. He says now, whatever extent you can speak your language and their language, whatever extent, now it depends on what you want. See, we have to have the mindset of these N-words, these slaves. We have to have them set up with a mindset that says that, hey, we'll do whatever you say. Yes, sir, boss. We ain't gonna do nothing. We ain't against you. No, we believe whatever you say, boss. Yes, sir. Right? Because the second that you start thinking that you can infiltrate somebody, that's the second that you become Nat Turner. The second that you can speak the language and make sure that you're not of it, that's when you become Harriet Tubman. The second you can speak somebody's language and not be of it, that's when all of a sudden you become Gannibal. That's when you become Gannibal's grandson. That's when you become Queen Nzinga. Queen Nzinga could speak the language of the Dutch and at the same time fight off the Dutch and at the same time make sure her people were free. Oh, she was a danger. She took the puppet kings off the throne and she reigned as a queen over her people. She was dangerous. Shaka Zulu, they talk about him like a dog till his day. Why? Because he was dangerous. How dangerous was he? Even when he got killed off by his own family and stuff like that, even though they had some issues in their tribe, his family took what he taught and used it to beat the brakes off the British people. He was dangerous. So even his legacy has to be messed up all the time. They have to mess up Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy. They're trying to figure out how to mess up Malcolm X's legacy. They told you that Marcus Garvey was some trash and that he was just a bad person and look at all the negative things. They never tell you that Marcus Garvey and the people that were with him, rocking the red, the black, and the green, they never tell you that Marcus Garvey and them had 4 ships. Some people say 4. I've only found 2, but some people say they had 4 ships and they were doing business, taking people on trips from England all the way over to America and back, trying to do stuff over to Africa. Talking about a black man should have his own culture and should be in tune with his culture, and we should be a diaspora around the world. You got to mess him up even after his death, because the language that he spoke, it means that you can be in a system and not be of it. He's dangerous. You got to take him out. Just like they did with the brother that they did, where he said you get the meanest, right? You get the meanest N-word male and the what? The one that's restless in this society, and you make him an example, and you make him an example out of any other man that comes close to him. You kill the chief. You make sure that you beat the others to the point to where they'll only be breeders, and you do it in front of the men, the women, and the children, and that way you make sure that they understand that if they ever try to cross us, right? Because if we ever figured out that we have a system that we're of, and we bring it into somebody else's system, realizing that we have the ability to forget breaking their system, if we ever just establish our system. See, that's, if anything, understand, people had this thing twisted. Even when they said we need to get people to infiltrate, you're not getting people to infiltrate their system. You're getting people who can move on all levels of their system, and all they do is institute their system. In a computer, you would call it a virus, right? I don't have to be in your computer. All I have to do is introduce software to your computer. I don't have to show up at your house in order to break your computer down. All I need to do is introduce a software. So I'm in another place, but the software is what? It is a language. It is a code, a bunch of zeros and ones put in particular order. And the culture that I put the zeros and ones in, now that I can speak your computer, if I put the zeros and ones in a particular order in your computer and get your computer to accept it, your computer will break down. I didn't have to be in your computer. I didn't have to take rule over your computer. I didn't have to type into your computer. All I had to do was introduce something that was foreign. Salah. All I had to do was introduce something foreign. Now your computer messed up. Right? And in order to get your computer right, you got to hope that the virus isn't so bad that you can't reset it to default settings. That's the only way you can get rid of it. If I hit you with a virus hard enough, the only thing you're going to be able to do is hopefully get somebody that can reset it to default settings. Because if they can't reset it to default settings, it's done. That computer is done. It can't be used right. It can't be used the way that it was intended to be used. And it's the same with this system. If we ever figure out that all we have to do is make sure that we have our own software, right? And our software that might work well in our computer might mess somebody else's computer up. It might have been developed in our computer and everything's fine when we developed it, right? But somebody else who has a system that is adverse to the software that we set up, it will break somebody's computer all to, you know what? Well, guess what? If it will break and beat the brakes off of somebody's computer, then guess what? Your system being systemic in what you're going to put together systematically in your culture, you have the ability to wipe out other people. And I'm not trying to say wipe out other people as far as kill them. I'm talking about they won't be able to handle your culture. Brother Dennis said, if you want to know how we as a people get over, you should listen over and over again until you understand. Amen. Amen. Right? And know your culture. That's why you got to listen to your heroes. What did Frederick Douglass say? You know, we always talking about JFK gave this speech. What did Frederick say? Abraham Lincoln said this. Well, you know, what did Frederick say? Right? What did W.E. Du Bois say? He would have wanted to say Du Bois, but still. Right? His mama called him Du Bois. I'm going to call him Du Bois. No, I'm not going to do that to our ancestors. If he want to be called Du Bois, I'll call him Du Bois. Right? But what did he say? Shalom, Helen, how you doing? Shalom, Connie, how you doing? Right? If I introduce something, if it's foreign, it can mess the computer up. It works somewhere else, but it doesn't work there. What he's saying is language is everything. So once again, he said, language is a peculiar institution. It leads to the heart of a people. That's the passion of a people. The more a foreigner knows about the language of another country, the more he is able to move through all levels of that society. Therefore, if the foreigner is an enemy of the country, to the extent that he knows the body of the language, to that extent is the country vulnerable to attack or invasion of a foreign culture. That's what he said. Right? That's what he said. That's what he's told. All right? And he said, for example, if you take a slave, if you teach him all about your language, he will know all your secrets, and he is no more a slave. For you can't fool him any longer. Right? For example, if you told a slave that he must perform in getting out our crops, and he knows the language well, he would know that our crops didn't mean our crops. And the slavery system would break down, for he would relate on the basis of what our crops really meant. So you have to be careful in setting up the new language for the slaves, would soon, or I'm sorry, so you have to be careful in setting up the new language for the slaves, would soon be in your house, or they would soon be in your house, talking to you man to man, and that is death to our economic system. Did you catch that? Shalom, Safar Dennis. How you doing? Shalom, Apostle Justice. Right? Did you catch that? This is a manifestation of a demonic situation. Right? Of a demonic situation, right? I want you to hear this now. So he says, let's go backwards. So for example, if you take a slave, if you teach him all about what? Your language, all, not some, but all about your language, he will know what? All your secrets. And he is then no more a slave. That's why there are slave codes. That's why there's coded language. You need to read Dr. Neely Fuller Jr. That's Neely Fuller, Fuller Jr. Dr. Neely Fuller Jr. Listen to him. He talks about code. There's codes out there, right? White is not even a status legally. Somebody can't go into a courtroom and say so-and-so has to be white. It doesn't make sense. Right, I was just doing some case study on that the other day about, I forget the guy's name, something O'Bacon from the 1960s. He was a senator. He wanted to, because of segregation, he wanted to make sure that black people were separate from white people. He had some private land, and we actually might deal with this in our sovereignty thing today because we're talking about the difference between private and public, right? But he had like private land, but he gave public interest to the people, and like he had wrote in the trust, that the public could be able to take over a park on his property, on his private property, but they could only do so on the condition that black people couldn't be in there, right? So we'll get further into that part as far as private and public. But I was studying it, and but basically the language he put in there was that only white people could be there. That's part of the reason why he lost. Like after he died, they had to allow black people to come on, or really, actually nobody really got the land. I think like basically they ended up giving it back to the family and saying you can't give it to public people because people in the public, right, the public law can't say that just because you're black you can't be somewhere, right? So when he wrote that in, he couldn't give it to the public, but there's a lot of people who do stuff like that. So had he just switched some language around, switched some words around, he would have been able to say, oh yeah, black people can't be on this land, and black people till this day wouldn't have been allowed to go on that land. He messed up in the language. See, people don't believe this stuff, but this is real. That's why you got to learn about law and sovereignty. They teach you to go away from law. Where did that language come from? That language came from you shouldn't know who's governing you, because nowhere, you don't see anybody up until when slave times, up until chattel slavery, you never saw anybody. See, we only do this weird thing of like, we act like there's no history past 1900 for some reason, right? Like if you go back into the 1600s and stuff, even the 1700s still, you don't really see anybody talking about that the laws that you should never know the law or the word of Yah in any culture. It's only when people started saying we have laws for one group of people and laws for another group of people that we started teaching that. That didn't come from biblical, and spiritual manifestation into the physical, right? That didn't come from study and all that stuff. That came from a system was put in place that told you and I that we shouldn't care about law. That never existed. That didn't exist. That didn't exist until there were people who were slave owners, or even if they weren't slave owners, figured that black people are not as good as white people. That all of a sudden we started hearing this doctrine that says that, hey, you shouldn't learn about law. You shouldn't be concerned about law. That's new, right? That's that new stuff. We didn't have that back in the day. We didn't have anything back in the day that was saying not to worry about law. That comes from somebody's culture, where they don't want you to know about law. That's where that comes from. That comes from somebody's culture. That's cultural. That's not kingdom. That's culture. Somebody else's culture. That's not kingdom culture. Somebody had to introduce that to you. That's a language thing. That's a language thing, right? So he says, look, so for example, if you told a slave, so if you take a slave, if you teach him all about your language, he will know all your secrets, and then he is what? No more a slave. For you can't fool him any longer. When you know the language of something, when you know the culture of something, when you know when it came from, you can't fool me anymore. If I know what Yashvai means, then I know why I should use Yashvai instead of Yesus or Yesu or Jesus. Matter of fact, if you were talking to the average person, I talk to people all the time, and I'll say, well, when they say, well, why are you so big on not using Jesus? They'll just say, that's just the way that you say Jesus in English. No, it's not. The way you say Jesus, or, Jesus, what you're saying in English when you say Jesus is Yesu, half man, half Zeus. You're not saying Yashvai. Yashvai does not translate to the Greek. Yashvai doesn't translate to the Greek. They have to make up letters. And the reason why even people say Yahavashai and all that is because they're coming off of Greek. Or Yahavashai, all that stuff. The reason why they're doing that is because they're coming from Greek. They're trying to take something that's Hebrew, and they're trying to say, well, the Greeks say Yahavashai, and so that's what we say. But the Greeks don't have Hebrew characters, so they had to make up letters, and they had to change the pronunciation because of the Greek letters they put in, rather than leaving it Hebrew. That's why we say this is cultural, this is language. That's why somebody says, if I go to another place, my name is Kofi, right? Kofi means Friday born. Now, if we were talking about my Israelite name, that's different. Yesu ben Yashrael, right? That's Yesu, or like, basically one in line with or you, I would guess you would say Yashhu, but like, basically one in line with who's the son and a son of Israel, right? So if you were to take that to another culture, somebody said, okay, in English, I'm just going to say, one in line with that's your name, right? One in line with and the son of Israel. Well, no, that's not my name. My name is Yasa. Really, it'd be Yasa, but a lot of people say Yesu. But Yasa bin Yashtael, that's my name. Well, no. Your name has to be this, right? My name, you guys know me as Kofi, right? Well, they say, well, your name Kofi, it means Friday born, so we'll just call you Friday. No. That's not my name. Oh, you want me to call you Friday born? No. That's not my name either. My name is Kofi. My name in English is Kofi. My name in Spanish is Kofi. My name in French is Kofi. My authority doesn't change because of the language I speak, but somebody will try to trick you into believing that you should give up your authority when you go into somebody else's culture. So my name Kofi is something that is actually messes with people in society. Right? My name is my authority. I'm not going to give up my authority just because this happens all the time, right? You go to class, somebody can't say your name, so they mess your name all up. I can only imagine, right? We got some people on here, like my wife's name, Maya. Probably she has all types of stories about they couldn't just say Maya, right? And she has M-Y-A as her spelling. They still couldn't get Maya. It's Mia, Mia, all this stuff, right? Or I can't imagine, we got a Tamara on here, Minister Tamara. I'm sure there was somebody who couldn't say Tamara. Was like, I was saying Tamara because I was thinking, because she's Israel, I was trying to put an H or a Yah on the end, right? But but I can't imagine how many people probably messed that up. Tamara, like you probably had a lot of stuff like that, right? Because somebody can't Deshima. I can't imagine how many times somebody messed Deshima. Deshima, right? Like that happens all the time, right? That happens all the time. But my name is my name. So when the teacher says it, right? Sometimes people just get tired of it. Oh, you know what? I'm tired of you. Just go. Yeah, whatever. Just call me. People would be like, look at my name, go Kofi, like coffee or Kofi, right? But what do? I correct you because that's my authority. No, my name is Kofi. I'm not mad or anything, but I just let them know. No, my name is Kofi. Yeah, Deborah, right? Matter of fact, even if you look at Deborah, one of the things I find funny is they'll say, like, when you go to other cultures, you've learned that there's an animal with stripes on it that has black fur and then has black and white fur over top of it, and is they say it's an equestrian or whatever, they say it's a horse, and you call it a zebra, but it's not zebra, it's zebra, right? You don't say Debra, you say Deborah. Right? So why would you say zebra, right? But because somebody else from another culture can't express stuff in your culture, they came and told you this is what you're gonna call it, and we just went with it. No, that's not a zebra, that's a zebra. So my son knows, right? If he sees that animal, he doesn't say that's a zebra, he says that's a zebra. We taught him that. Why? Because that's cultural. Even something that small reminds him of his culture. So when he hears another child say that's a zebra, even if he doesn't correct the child, he knows in his mind that's not our culture. That's not what that animal's called in Africa. That animal is actually a zebra. Something like that small, it changes the game. Minister Chairman said, when I tell people how to pronounce it and you still pronounce it wrong, I don't get it. Right. And a lot of that comes from a place where somebody's not just being cultural. Sometimes people are just like, you know what, like, I don't really care, so I'm gonna just call you whatever I want to call you. And that's a crucial place to be in, right? Like, you're not even gonna try to get my name right. You don't even see any value in attempting to get my name right. You just gonna keep calling me something wild. That's not even close to my name. You know that's not my name. You know, but it's a cultural thing. To treat somebody with respect in that regard means that you would have to treat their culture with respect. You'd have to treat somebody's mama with respect because mama named them that, right? It's culture. You said, I will have the spelling of my name, Sonia, and they still type it, Sonia. Yeah. Matter of fact, I've met some Sonias that spell it Sonia, and I didn't know what to do with it at first. And then I realized, like I was saying, like Sonia in my mind, this and that. Then I finally realized, this must be Sonia, because there's quite a few of these Sonias I'm meeting, right? But so it's cultural. You said I used to go up against that in jobs a lot. Yeah. Bashima said exactly. They don't want to get it and say, I'm just going to call you this or that. Yeah, I'm just going to call you this or that. They come up with a nickname. It's like, no, I don't need a nickname. My name is right. My name is Kofi. Like that's what it is, right? I was talking with somebody. How should one address you? Yeah, in first impressions. Like I was talking to somebody, and we were talking about the name Yahweh and Yashva and all that, and we were, and a lot of people always hit me with, well, I've seen stuff, and in the name of Jesus, I've seen this happen, and blah blah. And so since that's this or that or whatever, and I don't think it matters what you call them. And so I said to him, true, and this is usually my line to everybody. I listen to him and I say, okay, I get you. Well, what if the person told you that this is what their name is and that's what they want to be called? Do you think that you think you should call them by what they say call them? And then I say, I can show you in the word where he says clearly, call me Yahweh, call me Yashvai, right? Call me Ruach HaKodesh. Like it's very clear that that's what we should call them because they said call them that. Right, but it becomes a thing. Usually, a lot of people, I just don't feel like calling you that, so I'm gonna just call you something different. Right, but it's once again. So it's language though, right? So anyway, let's keep on going. For example, if you told a slave that he must perform in getting out our crops, and he knows the language well, he would know that our crops didn't mean our crops, and the slavery system would break down, for he would relate on the basis of what our crops really meant. Just like today when people try to say our country, well, if you know what our country really means in English, then you would what? You would realize that it's not our country. So the system of oppression over your life would break down. Why? Because it's not our country, it's your country. Put a Y in front of that O-U-R, and then we can have a conversation about this country. But this country is not ours, which is why I need to have something that is ours, which means that now your system of oppression over me, it breaks down. Right? They know this stuff. They know what's going on. They understand how this is supposed to work. If he says this is, if he says this is ours, he's not saying this is both of ours. He's saying this is mine. And you just so happen to work, right? But the same thing Malcolm X taught us, right? The difference between a field Negro and a house Negro. He said that the house Negro would hear the boss say, we got a nice here. And the house Negro would say that, yeah, boss, we got a nice house here. He said, that's a Negro that's out of his mind. That's a Negro that's out of his mind. He said, if the boss wasn't feeling good, then he said the house Negro wouldn't say, are you sick? The house Negro would say, what's the matter, boss? We sick? We sick. Right? He said that if the master's house caught on fire, the house Negro would fight harder to put the blaze out than the master himself. Right? And if you were come to that house Negro and say, let's run away, let's get out of here, let's separate, he would say, man, you crazy. From this, I'm quoting Malcolm's thing. I know this speech by heart. He said, man, you crazy. Separate from what? This good white man? Where are you going to find better clothes than here? Where are you going to find a better house than here? Right? He said, he said, where are you going to find better food than this? He said, that's a Negro that's out of his mind. That's a Negro that's out of his mind. That's a Negro that's out of his mind. He said, but then there was that old field Negro. He said, and he caught hell. He caught all the whippings. And he, when the house, or he said when the master got sick, he prayed that he died. Right? He said when the master house caught on fire, he prayed for a wind, for a breeze, right? And he said if somebody came to that field Negro and said, let's separate, let's get out of here, he said anywhere else is better than here. And then he said, I'm a field Negro. Right? And this is what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a cultural thing based off of language. If somebody has given into the culture, we have already started taking in their language, and we're using the language as if it's our own. We'll fight for them based off of the language. Their house becomes what? Our house. Their sickness becomes what? Our sickness. Their laws become what? Our laws. Right? The way that they speak and present themselves becomes how we speak and present ourselves. The second that you don't do that is the second that you're not a slave. The second you're not a slave is the second that their system of oppression breaks over you. That's all over language. So he says, so you have to be careful in setting up the new language for the slaves, setting up the new language. For the slaves would soon be in your house, talking to you man to man, and that is death to our economic system. The second you can look a white man in the eye and have a conversation, that is death to the system. The second that you believe that you are great is the second that the system goes down. See, that's why I don't mind being the shadow ban when I understand that I am a danger on any platform I go into, any platform I exist in. I am dangerous because I can break down, I can have people break away from being slaves. And when you can't, and when somebody breaks away from being a slave, you break down what? The economic system. He says, in addition, and I'm sorry, hold on, let me catch some of these things real quick. You said, right, their country, amen. You said, let's see, love this lesson, the explanations, never studied it before, grateful, amen. Thought it was poor learning rather than poor teaching by their own, amen. I hear you with that, yeah, right? Language. And if you catch on to somebody's language and you think that this language, right? So he's telling them that when we teach them English, we can't teach them English all the way. When we teach them American, so to speak, right? When we teach them culture, we can't teach them all our culture. We got to make them think they know our culture. And the reality is we're always leaving stuff out. You catch that? We're always leaving something out. We got to make them believe that we're really giving them all the stuff. But the reality is we're leaving, we're leaving a little out here or there. We're not really going to give them everything. We can't give them everything. We're going to give them a little bit of this, a little taste of this, but we're not going to give them everything. That's what he's saying, right? Because if you give them everything, if you give them all, then they can what? They can go up and down, and they can start putting that virus in their culture as a virus, because their culture, remember, their culture, they're only coming to their culture if they come into knowledge of who they are. That's what he taught. So if they know who they are, they're no longer a slave. So he says, in addition, the definitions of words or terms are only a minute part of the process. Right? They're only a small part. So the definitions of words or terms are only a small part. Right? So when we deal all those definitions, that's only a small part of it. That's why we always talk about culture. It's only a minute part of the process. Values are created and transported by communication through the body of the language. What did he say is created and transported? He said values. That's virtus. That's virtue. Values. Values are created and transported by communication through the body of the language. A total society has many interconnected values in their system. All the values in the society have bridges of language to connect them for orderly working in the society. But for these language bridges, these many value systems would sharply clash and cause internal strife or civil war, the degree of the conflict being determined by the magnitude of the issues or relative opposing strengths in whatever form. But he explains that just in case you didn't get all that. He says, for example, if you put a slave in a hog pen and train him to live there and incorporate him to value it as a way of life completely, the biggest problem you would have out of him is that he would worry about provisions to keep the hog pen clean, or the same hog pen and make a slip and incorporate something in his language whereby he becomes to value a house more than he does his hog pen. You got a problem. He will soon be in your house. Okay? So if somebody doesn't know their language, right? And I see somebody's trying to call in. If you're trying to call in, you can go ahead. I'm sorry, we have somebody who's trying to call in. Welcome to the Kofi Ofori podcast. We'll try to turn you up so everybody can hear you on the platform. You had something, a question, comment, concern you wanted to go ahead and speak on?
Hello, I'm audible?
Yes, hello, you're on.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. Thanks for asking. May I know about you? Where are you from? What do you do? What's your profession?
Well, I'm a pastor. Right now, we're talking about I do a lot of stuff as far as community building worldwide. We try to do things from places like India to Pakistan to Ghana to Nigeria to America, etc. And we try to make sure that people live better lives and that people come together, and we do it through the prism of the kingdom of heaven. But we were talking specifically today about finishing up the Willie Lynch letter. Did you have anything that you wanted to talk about regarding that, or any questions regarding that, or anything else?
Actually, I don't know how to use this app. Actually, I'm new here. I installed a few days back,
Okay.
but I didn't use. Right now, I'm using, and I get the opportunity to talk with you. So, I really nice to meet you.
Okay.
See,
Well,
talk to with you.
okay. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you being on, and thanks for listening in. And we appreciate it. And hopefully you enjoy the app and enjoy different things. So thank you very much for being on. Thank you for the call in. And so we are, so we appreciate it. Thank you for calling in. And I'm sorry, Brother Dennis said, educated with new defined English language. Amen. And thank you once again. I don't know if I didn't catch the pronunciation of the name. I don't know if it's Hanaya-san, but thanks for being on, and we appreciate you. And we have to understand culture is something that's a big part of what we do, who we are, what we're trying to create, et cetera, et cetera. Like culture is the thing. And so once again, he said, if you put a slave in a hog pen, right, that's a pen with the pigs, right, and train him to live there and incorporate in him to value it as a way of life completely, the biggest problem is what? Is that he will worry about the provisions to keep the hog pen clean. That would be it. That would be all that they would worry about. And a lot of us are in hog pen situations. We're in poverty, we're in distress, we are in sickness, we are dealing with a lot of stuff that is not that is not the will of the Most High for your life. It is not Yah's will. It is not really even most human beings' will that you would suffer and struggle and be all over the place, right? It is not really the will of most humanity that would happen, right? But there is a system in place that causes that to happen. So many of us, instead of saying, I need to go get a home, our thing, what? When we leave the house, shoot, anywhere is better than being under mama's roof or under daddy's roof. So I'm just going to go ahead and get an apartment. I'm gonna get an apartment. I just want to keep it clean. I'm gonna keep it nice, right? Well, get a house, right? But that's a different culture. That's a different value system, right? So he says most of us are okay with the hog pit. Most of us are okay with going to parks that are dirty and messed up, and that there's pollution, and that's all over the world. There's a lot of places where people get used to being in very difficult and messed up and bad situations and bad values, right? There are a lot of places where people are dealing with that quite often, right? And they get used to doing it, where they say, well, at least we can just keep this hog pen tidy. At least we might not come out, we might not have generational wealth. We might not be able to provide and have our culture be what it needs to become. We might not have somebody respect us as women and men. We might not have people that want to listen to what we're supposed to do, but hey, at least we can just look clean. A lot of people wear a lot of nice clothing and go back to very poor circumstances. A lot of people look good on the street. I told you guys about this before, where I came from a place, or don't leave their block, hood, or city, right? A lot of people, there are a lot of people that live in D.C. that never been out of D.C. or the DMV, right? There's a lot of people in Baltimore where if you say you're going on vacation, a vacation to them is they going from Baltimore to D.C. and they think that they went on a vacation, right? There's a lot of people in the ATL who never been outside Atlanta or the area surrounding Atlanta, right? They go to Marietta, they think they're doing something. There's a lot of people who've been in Chi-Town their whole life, and if they ever go to Wisconsin and go to Milwaukee or something for a fair or something like that, they think they did something. And I'm not trying to say that we should look down on anybody, but what I'm telling you is that's real talk. Like a lot of you said, you know what I'm talking about in the DMV, amen, right? There's a lot of people who that's as far as they go. You start talking about going to Africa, they got to speak down on Africa. You know why? Because they've never been there. You start talking about, hey man, you know, let's go to let's look at England and say, man, why would I want to go to England? They don't even have good food and this and that or whatever. Why wouldn't you go? Right? Because you have a culture that says I should be okay staying in the same environment. You said truth, Brooklyn has never seen the Bronx. That's real talk, right? Nah, I mean, son, that's real talk right there, right? You know, that's real though. You said you took your cousin to the mountains, Ocean City, not even 2 hours away. Yeah, and that's a great experience for a lot of people, right? You know, you know, or even just something like going to the Appalachian Mountains, going to see native land, going to you know, people will tell you not to go to other places. They want you to be excited and happy about the hog pen. Even the language thing that you hear people say, why are you speaking with an accent? Why do you not speak like we want you to speak, etc.? Well, it's because I bring a culture with me. Why are you threatened by my culture? You're threatened by the culture because you're protecting the hog pen. But remember that here's what he says at the end. He says, but if you make a slip, he says the same hog pen, if you have the same hog pen and make a slip, if you slip up and incorporate something in his language whereby he comes to value a house more than he does a hog pen, you got a problem. He will soon be in your house. Now, this is where the lie comes in too. Because I don't know, I want to be in your house. You a slave master. Why would I want to be in your house? I just want a house. Right? Like, why can't I just have a house? Why does it have to be I'm trying to have your house? This is what happens with black men a lot in this country, right? And a lot of people in other countries. In India, it happens there. In Pakistan, it happens there. A white person says, oh, these people are going to take your woman. They're going to do this or whatever. Like, why is it that I just can't be free to have my woman? Why is it that you have to put me down or else I would want your woman? And the only way I would want your woman, by the way, is if I was educated by you to believe that your woman is greater than mine. The second that I believe that my woman is great the way that she is, and she should be protected and valued and understood and loved and esteemed, why would I want yours when I have mine? I grew up with this woman. I was breastfed off the breast of a black woman. Why would I not want to notice the breast of another black woman? I was raised in the womb of a black woman, and she birthed me through her hips. Why wouldn't I be attracted to the hips of my own woman? Right? I was taught about the Most High from a black woman. Why would I not want to hear what a black woman has to say? It's all about, yeah, you want to be the man in your society. Well, if I look up to my own father, see how to get this? If you didn't teach me how to go away from my own father, then I would want to be about my own father. So allow me to just teach my sons to look up to their fathers. And when they start looking up to their fathers, you won't have to worry about it. They trying to take over what you have. Right? Deborah said, I get that all the time. They say I'm speaking proper. Bound. And Sonia said, bound by the mind and belief. You said, I strive to be better at speaking. Right. And it's about language. So even speaking well, think about that. Talking about what you saw. Let's circle around that, Sister Deborah, for a little bit. Even when it comes to speaking well, just to speak well. When it comes to speaking well, some people believe that means you're speaking white. Think about that. I speak English well. I can go from saying, man, you good? You know what I'm saying? Like, bruh, like for real, man, no cap. Like, this is what's going on about. Like, I can do that. However, I can also say, hey, brother, like, you know, I just want to let you know that no lie, this is what's going on. I can say the same thing different, but somebody says one sounds white and one sounds black. Why? Because the white is supposed to be better. You said they always tell you that, yeah, the white is supposed to be better. So I can speak even in the different culture, but once again, that's you also bring in another culture, right? Because oftentimes when somebody says it's hip hop or something, a hip hop culture being brought, a lot of times people have a belief that means, like, even think about what a lot of people think hip hop is. Hip hop people believe that, like, basically hip hop is rap music and it has to be gangster music or whatever, right? Got to be about G, you know, being a G, being an OG, being the next generation of him, being somebody who's out here making sure that they got all this. It's rich, it's Rich Roddy. It's Kendrick Lamar, even though I don't really have too much issue with Kendrick Lamar, at least not as much as some. It's got to be Eminem. That's got to be what the culture is. Hip hop is more than just music. Hip hop is art. When you see spray paint, when you see people tagging stuff on the side of buildings and stuff, that's hip hop. That's considered to be hip hop. Hip hop is DJ, disc jockey, right? Being a DJ, that's hip hop. Being an MC, that's the person that rhymes. Dance is hip hop. When people were pop locking, that was hip hop, right? And clothing, what you wear, that's hip hop, right? There's 5 different things working together. That's a culture that comes with it. But they only focus on what? Oh, well, we can't let hip hop. Well, you know, there's people that are in the hip hop that talk about the Most High in hip hop all the time. You know, there's people in hip hop that talk about stop downing your women. You know, there's people in hip hop that have clean hip hop, right? Like, not hip hop is not just gangster music, but we have been convinced that all rap music that who plays, that white people are playing on your radio station, right? Or white people are playing on YouTube because they're the ones that are funding this stuff. We're convinced that they are we're messing up their culture. Well, the reality is that they're the ones presenting you as what you are. They have you speaking a language that's not even yours. The only way I need you to understand, going back to Minister Malcolm X. He said, you know, the people who put drugs in your society, the ones that you will that lock you up for drugs, right? He says the ones who will. He said the white man will sell alcohol in your neighborhood and then arrest you for being, being under the influence. He said every time you open the seal on a liquor bottle, you are breaking a government seal. Right? Think about that. Every time that you open the seal of the liquor bottle that's going to get you in trouble and you're going to get arrested for it, every time you open that seal, that person, that wino, the person you call a wino, that wino couldn't even be a wino if the government didn't put the wine in his hand, didn't allow it. They used to have a law where you couldn't buy alcohol, even though it was because they couldn't control the taxes and stuff on it. But they used to have a law where you couldn't buy alcohol. They could easily say alcohol is something that we just won't let you have. It's something that kills people. Or we'll limit what you can have. So if you get alcohol, you're only allowed to buy 1 bottle of this, and it can only be this much proof, and that's it. And when you buy it, you can't have another one for a whole week. They could put law in order. There's other countries where alcohol is illegal, right? In Libya, alcohol used to be illegal before they killed Gaddafi. They said that was one of the things that made him evil. He was a tyrant because he wouldn't let people get drunk. Imagine that. That was one of the reasons it was okay to kill him, because he wouldn't let people get drunk. That's one of the reasons why we celebrated his being killed, as they decapitated another one of our kings. Well, meanwhile, he was making sure that if you got married in this country, he was making sure that he gave you a stipend. He made sure that he gave you a place to live in for free for up to a year, I believe. He made sure that he was about to develop his own currency, or their own currency that other African nations could use. That's why African nations are just now starting to get back to trying to have this new version of currency. But they basically, Gaddafi was about to do all that. He was evil, though, because he went against the system. He spoke their language too well. He spoke his own system, and he said, I'm not done with that. You know, Gaddafi, he had an all-female secret service, basically. His personal guard was women. That's who protected him. But they would tell you that Gaddafi is somebody that hated women. Well, how are you going to hate women and his whole guard is women? He trusted women with his life more than he trusted men. But somebody in another language, another culture gets you to speak ill about him. Now that's what you speak. Right? You said it sounds like kingdom living. Sounds too much like it. That's why they get rid of it. You said have many hats of language and conversation from the streets to the boardroom. Yep. And you should. That's why some children don't want to talk to us, because some children are like, you don't ever speak our language. Christina said, I speak but understand body language way more than verbal language. Amen. Cole said, rap is something you do. Hip hop is something you live. Boogie Down Productions. I got you. Yeah, they were scared of him. He was a huge threat. He wanted to unite African nations. Right? You know, they got mad at him because you notice they always talk about Gaddafi. He was wearing a uniform, this, that, or whatever. He was always wearing a military uniform. Look at him, especially towards the end of his life. He was never in military uniform. He was always wearing African threads. And he was very quick to say, hey, even though I'm light-skinned, this and that, he was like, we need to get rid of colorism. right? But they got you to speak something. All they had to, matter of fact, because culturally, this is all they have to do. All they had to do was speak it. They didn't even have to get you to speak it. You spoke it because they spoke it. All they had to say was Gaddafi is the enemy. And all they had to do was get a black man to speak Gaddafi is the enemy. And all of a sudden, when black man co-signed on it, hey, let's kill him. It didn't take that much. All you needed was to have a black man hear that he's the enemy, and then have that same black man speak that he's the enemy. Let's wipe him out. All it takes is a white person. Check this out. Check this out. You ready for this? What is the they done had so many different versions of the people we're fighting on this war on terrorism. Somebody help me out. What's some of the things? I don't even pay attention to it enough. I don't know it when I see it. Can somebody help me out? What's the different? ISIS. Okay. ISIS. Do you know that there's no group that called themselves ISIS ever? Yeah, you said you noticed that with this dress. Amen. But did you know that there's no group that ever called themselves ISIS? Right? So all it took was somebody to create a name called ISIS, and now that's what you know them by. No such thing as ISIS. I'm trying to remember some of these other groups that have been out here, right? What was Osama bin Laden's group? Taliban. You know, there was never a group that called themselves the Taliban. We're going to kill some devils today. We're going to make sure that you get this culture thing now, right? You know, there was never a group called the Taliban. Somebody wrote that down, made it up, put it in a news article. Now you use the Taliban. And if I say the Taliban, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Even though if you were to talk to them, they might not know who you're talking about. Right? That's how easy it is. So all I have to do is label somebody. Matter of fact, check this out. You know, the only reason why you call white people colonizers, you think you call white people colonizers because you weren't even using that term until a white man authorized it to be used in a Disney film. That Disney film is called Black Panther. You weren't calling white people colonizers before that. A white person authorized for a black man to put that in the script, and now unto this day. Yeah, Iran-Contra, Oliver North, yeah, I'm with you, yeah, definitely, you know, we get into the 80s and stuff with that. Really, that goes back to the 60s, 70s too, if we want to go all the way with that, right? But you never called anybody colonizer until a white person said call them a colonizer. So when you call somebody a colonizer, we should get over it. Like when people say, oh, that's not even your fight. I don't even really worry about you don't really hear me use the term colonizer. I use it when I'm talking about colonization because that's what we comprehend. And a colonizer is one who colonizes. Therefore, I would talk about them colonization. But that's not who's out here calling. Like I call you what you are. Like you know, if you want to say you were colonizing this and that, I would say that you created colonies, this and that. But that wasn't a word we use. Why do you call yourself African American? Because a white person told Jesse Jackson, start calling your people African Americans. They're getting too hip on this term black. You know, some of them even starting to use the word copper. Do you know that just like there's a Jet magazine, there used to be a magazine looked exactly like Jet magazine, and it's the name of that magazine, it was called Copper. Right? That's your history. And that's not that long ago. We're talking the 60s. Might have even been to the 70s. Right? Like we're not even using these terms. Sure, these words might have existed, but you weren't using this stuff to explain a whole group of people. The word Latino existed, but you weren't using Latino to talk about a whole group of people up until Eurocentric governments told you to start calling yourself that. That wasn't your language. That wasn't even something that they used in their language. It was a way of making sure that they continued to separate people. Right? Remember, if you ever knew all the language, he didn't say some of the language. He said we got to teach them the language and make sure that they're limited, because if they ever comprehended and understood what all language, if they ever understood where it came from. Remember, they said earlier that the N-word male that's going to be constant and the N-word male that's going to be a mule to be limited or die off. He said both of them are tied together and they both need to make sure that they have no clue where they came from. And when we're talking about denying the language, he said we're further severing who they are. They're severing themselves from they are. Severing, he used to say, this is what he said. He said further severance from their original beginning. That's what is going on. Further severance from what? For where they originate from. Anything that causes you to be the original man, the original spirit, the original male spirit, the original female spirit, it must be eradicated. If it is not eradicated, the system cannot be in place. It is your culture. It is the kingdom culture. It is the kingdom laws. It is marital laws. It is natural laws. It is universal laws. It is even constitutional laws. It is laws of attraction. It is laws of first mention. It is law that's going to cause you to get out of this stuff, because law what? Protects your rights. If you know what you are lawfully and legally bound by, and also, watch this, if you know what you are lawfully and legally allowed to obtain, you become a different person. See, you're lawfully kingdom. You are a fellow heir with Yahshua HaMashiach. How dare you say that you can't obtain and do certain things, and you're a fellow heir with Yahshua himself? We have to what? Crossbreed you and get you to a place to where you deny your original beginning. Your original beginning is perfection. That's it. That's an amen, somebody. That's your original beginning is perfection. Maturity. A state of maturity. A person being in a place and doing things that are always mature. Perfection. That's your original state. That's the original intent over your life. When you were created, that's what the Most High wanted for you. Thanks for the agreement, Christina and Cole. And thank you, Brother Stephen. Amen, Minister Tamara. Right? Amen, Murphy. This is what we were created, intended for. You said long distance communication without technology. I didn't quite catch what you were talking about on that, Brother Dennis. I'm sorry. If you want to further explain, so I can make sure I'm with you on that as we get ready to take our leave shortly. These are the things that we have to have honest conversation about. Like, why are we not having honest conversation about the fact that they have taught you a language that's not yours? Tomorrow we're going to go through the lyrics of the Mos Def song I was talking about, called Mathematics, right? And I'm going to try my best to get around it without using the curse words, because he does use curse words, but I should be able to do so. But we want you to see systemically, there's a lot of people who are talking about this, and we just don't know, right? We just don't know what's going on. Right? But there's a lot of people who are trying to give you game, trying to tell you about this, trying to teach you about these things. Right? We don't have a clue as to what's going on, but it doesn't mean that we can't find out. And it starts with culture. Remember, he told us that the anomaly is going to come. The anomaly, which is black men will become men again, black women will become women again. Matter of fact, black men will become husbands and fathers. Black women will become wives and mothers. Right? Even before they get married, they will be qualified as husbands and wives and fathers and mothers, right? And then once that happens, the anomaly is going to take place, because why? The brain is always trying to correct itself. And whenever it comes into anything that reminds it of its natural state, it has to begin, it goes through a questioning process. That is why they put out so much false information. Right? They couldn't get rid. Matter of fact, Kofi _42 and Kofi _40, both of them still exist. They just won't allow me to get access to it, which is why we're working on the stuff we're working behind the scenes. And we might just do a thing where, especially when we start getting back on the line, we might just start asking people to kind of send in some blasts to legal TikTok and other places at the same time, and saying, hey, what's going on? If we can make enough stir and let people know we're serious about it, they'll probably allow us to get our stuff back, right? And then we can use Kofi _43 as the backup. But I get it. Because once again, we are there, right? And so they had to do what? In order to get us offline, they had to lie. They had to keep saying that we were doing things or saying things or being about things that we aren't really. Okay, I needed science. Okay, long distance communication. Amen. I'm with you, Brother Dennis. Right? So that's why they had to do it. I get it. I don't like it. I get it, though. I don't receive it. I don't sieve it so I can receive it, but I get it. I comprehend, in other words. I don't understand it. I comprehend why you would do so. You have to lie on somebody, and so don't be surprised when this system and people who are connected to this system have to keep lying on you, because they have to control the language. If you speak one thing, they have to find a way to say, hey, that's not what they really meant, because in our culture, this is not what this really means. Right? This is why when it comes to the Nuremberg Code, they have to lie and say, oh, you were saying this, and the World Health Organization says you were talking about COVID and this and that, and how dare you say this or whatever. And all I did was introduce facts. Like, you can look up the Nuremberg Code for yourself. We did a whole thing on it, right? You can just look it up for yourself, be able to do it. Matter of fact, our exemption letters, Nuremberg Code mentioned there, right? And it's part of what we're using. Why? Because legally, the Nuremberg Code is something used worldwide. It's something that the American Health Association says you can use. It's something that the United States Army has been saying that their troops can use to make sure that they don't have to get stuck with anything they don't want to since the 1960s, I believe, right? But somebody would tell you and I that's a lie. Why? Because it's not their culture. And it puts their culture in danger. Because like he said, their teaching is to get rich white men, and therefore everybody else they taught were white and black and in between, to get people to believe that if a black man ever wants to be on his own, it means he wants what you have. I don't want what you have. I want what's for me. I don't want what's for your people. I want what's for my people, because your people need to get better too. Right? I don't just need my people to get better. I need you to get better before you even start talking to me about getting better. Right? Real talk. You said, oh man, great lesson, gotta go. Okay, Sister Sonia, thanks for being on, appreciate you. You are a Willie Lynch anomaly, I love that, amen. You said, yeah, the vids on your YouTube, I found valuable and useful, amen. Yeah, and so they gotta get rid of it. They gotta say you lied, you gotta do this. So we're trying to put as much back on as we can, and I actually been away for a little bit. I don't think I put anything up for close to a week, and trying to get back on track with them and put stuff, but they did. So it takes me a long time. We had classes where people are like, hey, where's the recording for this? Hey, I'm sorry, I got to kind of start from scratch with the recordings because all that stuff was there, was connected. So now we learned the value of doing this, making sure that we got the stuff behind the scenes, making sure we're paying to make sure that we can go to our iCloud and do some other things and make sure that we can eventually have a place of hard storage for everything. So we have to go through everything we do and make sure it's not just virtual, but it's hard storage, so that when we have to start from scratch next time, now we've learned, hey, we can just keep things moving, right? We're looking at another place. Matter of fact, one of the people I'm going to have a conversation with, I need to go and look at their stuff again for us to have another platform, and we'll see how that one works. And somebody is connected to a family member that owns a new platform, and they might let us come on live and do something there. So, but you have to comprehend that they're controlling the language. Facebook, IG, YouTube, the podcast, it belongs to somebody. Now, the podcast they can't do too much with because we pay for the podcast, right? So we can say whatever we want. But especially if you're on somebody's platform and they own it and you don't, they get to control the language. This is why we need to fight for our own, because when you have your own, guess what? You control the language. When you have your own land, you say this is common law on the land, right? When you have your own, doctrine, right, which is not your own, right, it's not ours, it's the Most High's. But when you have your own doctrine, guess what? You control what that doctrine is. You have ownership over it. Self-accountability. See, when you own yourself, you have accountability over yourself. You get to hold yourself accountable to law. Even when we try to hold ourselves accountable to somebody else's law, people still lose their lives. People still get shot because it's not your law. You got to figure out how to be in that law, but not of it. You said, so do we make money from the podcast? Not really, at least not as of yet. As we grow more, we're getting to a place where now people will start paying attention to us a little more and maybe start, asking us if we want to do some kind of commercials or something. And we'll look at that at some point, because that's a whole thing, especially with us trying to keep things in order. But however, yeah, we don't really make, unless I guess like you do on YouTube, people can do super chats on the podcast or something like that. But, for the most part, if people want to do donations or anything like that, we just do it through, Cash App, PayPal, Green Dot, Apple Pay, things like that. If they want to do stuff through Zelle or direct to the account or checks or whatever, we allow people to do stuff different way, but we don't really make money off of the podcast. Even though, because of this situation that's come up with the TikTok thing being taken down, platform, we actually have been able to increase and have more people listening to the podcast. And we were already doing that before TikTok went down, but we're thankful to kind of sped that up. So all things work together for the greatness of Elohim, for those of us that love him and are called according to his purpose. And we're grateful. And we're talking about culture, controlling the language. We're taking control back. Time to take control back of your language. Time to take control back of your life, of your house. Time to take control back. What are you speaking over your house? Is it somebody else's language that says that you should be depressed and you're not good enough and you're not smart enough and your hair doesn't look right and you don't speak in tongues enough and you don't do this and you don't do that and you're not holy enough? Or are you going to control the language, right? And if anybody does want to do a super chat or something like that on the podcast, we appreciate it. I think somebody's done one before, so we appreciate it when you guys do stuff like that. Regardless, though, we're thankful and grateful for having all of you on. It's time to control the language, and it's time to be honest about these things that are going on systemically. These are things that were systematically put in place. These are demonic things that were put in place skillfully and willfully. They are not accidents. It is not an accident. I don't understand why it is that we talk about manifestation and then somehow we don't want to talk about manifestation of racism. Manifestation of anything. Manifestations are negative and positive. If you speak bad things in your mind, you will see some bad things show up in your life, right? If you have bad things in your heart, out of the abundance of the heart doth the mouth speak, right? If you believe that whatever you speak will come into manifestation, then why in the world is it that we believe that's racism and slavery and chattel slavery and 13th Amendment citizenship, 14th Amendment citizenship, United States Constitution versus the United States of America? Why do we think these things are accidental and don't need to be talked about? It is not because the Bible says they should not be talked about, right? It is because we believe, based off of somebody else's culture, that we should not talk about these things. Yes, Brother Dennis, we'll be bringing sovereignty back at the end of January, so we'll definitely make sure that we have some conversations. We need to catch up and stuff anyways. I'll try to reach out to you this week and set something up with you, or just call you, I guess, if you're free sometime this week. Amen. Also said, skillfully and willfully created to keep us enslaved and bound. And by the way, this is why we need to talk about the word of Yah. We're not just talking about the Willie Lynch letter and saying the Willie Lynch letter is going to happen just because of you and I. We're talking about because of the kingdom principles. Why? Because the truth will what? It will create freedom. It will make you free. And when you are made free, you shall be free indeed. Legal, lawful terminology. What does that mean? What is it to be free indeed? Did you catch that? Indeed. What is a deed? What does a deed mean? If I have a deed to a house, all right, we got deeds to 2 properties, right? If I have a deed to a property, what does that mean? Somebody help me in here. We don't. This is why etymology is important. If I'm free indeed, what does that deed give me access to? If I tell the truth, it means that I'm free because I get a deed. My deed gives me ownership, law. It gives me ownership, the deed, the law. It gives me ownership. If I have a deed to a home, it means lawfully I have the rights protected or my rights to that home are protected by the deed. It is amen. My title is my ownership. My deeds give me title. They give me ownership. The reason why I can talk the way I talk is because I do the right deed. I have the right deed. And because I'm free indeed, because I tell the truth, I'm able to have ownership. We have to take ownership over who we are as kingdom citizens. We have to take ownership of who we've been called to be. And when we do, now I'm free indeed. Now I'm free indeed. That's why sovereignty is important. I'm free indeed. That's why it's not just having faith, but faith without works is dead, because what I work is deed. My faith gives me deed too. If I do things in faith, then I do things in deed. If I do things in works, then I do things in deed. If I do things in law, then I do things in deed. If I do things in grace, then I do things in deed. It's all about title, ownership, law, legality, sovereign reign over things, right? Where my foot lands, that is mine. I don't know why it is that we'll say that that's important from Old Testament, right? Where your foot treads, that is yours. But then all of a sudden, when somebody says that you should know about some law, we say that doesn't matter anymore, right? Right? Because we're not in deed. The deed brings the title. The deed brings the ownership. I put up a TikTok video this rising, and I got to get ready to cut off because we're going to lose our feed for the podcast. So thank you everybody for being on. Let me just end by saying this. I did a video on TikTok. I talked about that. Like, people are chasing money. I said average people wake up every day and they're going to use most of their day to do stuff that they don't want to do so that they can finally try to see if they know what their calling is, so that they can possibly do a little bit of what they want to do. I said above average people already know what they're called to do. Right? They know what their deeds are, what deeds they need to do. They already know what they're called to do, so that they can solely focus on what they want to do. right? That's doing things in deed. We'll leave it right there. We'll get ready to take our leave. Thank you so much for being on. We appreciate everybody for being on. Shalom WCG. Thanks for being on. Those who are listening on all platforms later on, we appreciate you being on as well. As always, check out my wife, the Honorable Maya, Bloom and Flourish. That's not A&D, but the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. You can follow her on TikTok, YouTube, and her website. She's a healer. She's a herbalist. She's a chemist. She's a biologist by degree, by the way. And she's helping us with natural medicine. We're getting ready. ChangeTheLinesInitiative.org, which is also her nonprofit, is getting ready, I believe on the 18th. Same day as Women in Red, matter of fact. I believe that it's going to be something that we're going to be in the community doing. So if you'd like to be able to participate in that or give some kind of blessing for that, for us to be able to bless the community, we appreciate you guys in advance for helping out with the clothing drive. Thank you all for being on. It's been my pleasure as always to be in front of you. Our prayers that you not only be hearers of this word, you be doers as well. That means you got to study it to show yourself approved, that you can be a workman or a workwoman that need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. We thank you so much. Don't forget, sisters, December 18th, Women in Red, 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern in New York time. Be ready for that. Be ready, be ready, be ready. Get excited. And we're thankful and grateful for everything that the Most High is going to help us out with that. Oh yeah, and December 31st, just to put it out there, December 31st. We're going to have some stuff for our children in between there, so that we can do something for them around the holiday season where they don't have to worry about the holiday thing, especially because a lot of them are going to try and do lack of Christmas cold turkey this year. So we're going to do a little something special for them. Be ready for that. But December 31st, watch night service. December 31st, we will do a watch night service. For those of you who are part of our Hebrew Holy Day committee, be ready. We'll try to have a meeting somewhat soon. I'll try to text you guys sometime today to see if a day next week or something would work for us. So be ready for that to come up. That'll be coming up soon. And so we can talk about that, and also a whole bunch of stuff for next year to make sure we know what's on the calendar, and we can say who's going to be in charge of what, and we can start working things out with that. So thank you very much. Thank you all for donations, anything that you've been donating your time, talent, effort, energy, finance, etc., your goods, whatever. We appreciate it. We appreciate the King and Queen in each and every one of you. As always, this has been Pastor Kofi, aka the Shadow Band One, Pastor Servants of Christ, where we are always changing lives one mind at a time by being a voice of the voiceless and speaking the unspoken. Until I have the great privilege, opportunity, and responsibility of being in front of you all again, please remember as always that you are loved, you are necessary, you're majestic, you're fearfully and wonderfully made, in you, which is all of us working together, will be the reason why people who are in this system no longer have to be up. Shalom. Peace.